From Peter Matheson lying about his company owning an aircraft, to the Dragons losing 230,000 pounds to fraud, here are the Dragon Den's pitches that were actually scams. Peter Matheson, CEO of Caledonia Matheson Airways, went on the show looking for a £150,000 investment in exchange for a 15% stake in his company. He had this grand plan of starting an aviation company in Scotland that specializes in seaplanes, and these bad boys can take off and land on both water and land, which means they can fly from pretty much anywhere. Cool, right? But things started getting interesting when Duncan Bannatyne asked about the flight prices. At first, Peter tried to measle his way out, but eventually gave in, saying that they were going to charge £2,000 per hour. And if you brought some buddies along, the cost would be lower. Deborah Maiden wanted to know about the return on investment, but Peter didn't give a clear answer. He talked about entering the market with minimal expenses, but didn't give a specific time frame for the return on investment. Bannatyne wasn't too happy either, pointing out that the startup airline had a huge debt and some serious risks. As the Dragons kept grilling him, things got even shadier. It turned out that Peter hadn't been completely honest about who owned the aircraft, confessing that it wasn't owned by his company, but by another business he'd invested in. That revelation shattered the investors' trust, and all the Dragons decided to pass on the opportunity. Peter got defensive, claiming he'd already poured £300,000 into the business and believed it was benefiting the company. In the end, Peter walked away from the Den without securing the investment and was upset with how the Dragons treated him. But let's face it, his lack of clarity about the plane's ownership and the hefty amount of money needed didn't make the business very attractive for investment. Tough luck, Peter. His company looked shady, but this next one was a scam. Two guys, Paul Lobo and Barry Ritchie, came on the show pitching a water purifier, claiming that their machine can get rid of all the gunk in water. They even did some tests to prove it, but the Dragons weren't too convinced, questioning why anyone would pay £600 for this thing. They wondered if the UK had enough humidity for it to work, and they didn't believe that the machine had a lower carbon footprint than other water coolers. But it soon got more interesting, because after the clip blew up on the internet, people started investigating, and turns out those tests the guys did were totally fake. The rods they used were made of different metals that reacted differently than regular purifiers, so they were straight up lying to everyone. The two even showed off how the machine turns air into purified water. Like, who needs that in the UK? And it's crazy expensive too. Basically, they were selling a useless dehumidifier with false capabilities. After the Dragon's Den episode, Tana Water UK, a company that makes water machines, started warning people about buying filters from pyramid sellers without a service agreement. Air Oasis Limited, the company on the show, wanted the Dragons to invest in their business, but left without any money when the Dragons found out they were planning to sell through a pyramid scheme. The big problem, according to Tana Water UK's managing director, Nick Ean, was that Air Oasis wanted to sell water filters to customers without saying how they would provide regular service and replace the filters. Pyramid schemes don't give much incentive to take care of customers after the initial sale, so it's good that the Dragons didn't invest in that business. But they came close to getting scammed with this next one. Andy Niakis came in asking for a fat grant to fund his company Lioness. He had this shopping cart that supposedly gives you up to 40% cash back on your purchases, which sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, here's the catch. When the Dragons asked him about their share in the company, Andy started dodging the question like a pro. Kevin wasn't having it. He wanted answers. But instead of giving a straight response, Andy asked for patience and acted all mysterious. But it was soon clear that his whole cash back scheme was a scam. He claimed customers would get a whopping 20% cash back on their purchases, but that's something you'd find on a shady website. The Dragons saw through his nonsense and shut him down real quick, much like this next one. Marco Haji Kaipri wanted the Dragons to invest in his company Pro Gains that delivers customized meals to your door. Sounds pretty legit, I know, but Deborah had her suspicions right off the bat and started grilling Marco with questions. And guess what? Marco turned out to be a big fat liar. He said his company's name was copyrighted and had some disputes with another company. But when Deborah asked to see the papers, it came out to be a train wreck, since Marco had lied about the copyright thing. The papers he showed were from something completely unrelated, and he blamed it on his dad, saying he got the wrong info. Yeah, right, Marco. The Dragons were done with his lies and didn't invest a penny. Just like this next one. Fiona Arori came in representing the company Mara Seaweed, shocking everyone since she only owned 10% of it. The majority shareholder wasn't even there, and Fiona tried to hide this little detail from the Dragons at first. Sneaky, right? It raised some serious doubts about her her honesty, and the Dragons were out from the start. They didn't want anything to do with that shady business. And honestly, who can blame them? These scammers thought they could fool the Dragons, but they ended up getting exposed and rejected, just like this next one. Dave Collings from Mississauga, Ontario, went to the Dragons hoping to get them on board with his business idea. Collings, a snowplower, wanted a whopping $400,000 in exchange for 40% of his company, Snowplow Express. Collings realized that snowplowers in North America face a problem. They got their plows and salt spreaders, but sometimes they needed extra equipment at the job site. That's where Collings' invention, the snowplow attachment, comes in. It's a fancy gadget that helps snowplowers transport their stuff more easily. But hold on, the Dragons had some questions. They wanted to know if people really needed this thing and how much it cost. Collings didn't have all the answers yet. He hadn't even made any sales or got approval from the authorities. The Dragons weren't convinced and thought Collings was too full of himself and didn't have his act together. They wanted him to do more research before asking for such a big investment. Plus, they thought his valuation was way off. In the end, none of the Dragons wanted to invest in Snowplow Express. Collings left the den empty-handed, realizing that he needed more than just an idea to win over the Dragons. It's a lesson learned about being prepared and having all the facts before pitching a business. It's clear that the Dragons can spot scams from a mile away, so you wouldn't think that they'd ever be conned. But you're wrong. Jean-Claude Baumgartner pulled off a crazy scam, swindling a whopping £230,000 from Peter Jones and Theo Pfeiffitis. Can you believe it? Baumgartner had this big idea for a sat-nav for skiers, and he convinced the Dragons that it was the real deal. But it was all a bunch of lies. He used fake emails and letters to make his bogus business plan seem legit, and it actually worked. The Dragons fell for it hook, line, and sinker. But his luck eventually ran out. Baumgartner soon got what he deserved, a sentence of 2 years and 8 months behind bars. The judge didn't mince words, calling him out for being persistently dishonest. Turns out he lied about important equipment and created fake documents left and right. And that's not even the worst part. Baumgartner tried to shift the blame, saying the Dragons didn't give him the support and experience they promised. He played the victim card, saying he felt let down and didn't get the help he needed. His lawyer even begged for a suspended sentence so he could keep working on his fabulous creation, claiming he truly believed in the product and thought he could pay back the Dragons within 6 months if he were set free. Nice try, but no dice. In the end, Baumgartner had to face the music and admit to 1 count of fraud. The judge didn't buy a sob story, calling him out for making nasty accusations against innocent people just to save himself. This whole drama happened after the Dragon's Den episode was filmed back in 2009, and by then, Baumgartner's company was already in hot water, with huge losses and debts. The investors smelled something fishy and dug deeper, exposing the whole scam. Baumgartner thought he could get away with his dishonesty, but greed got the best of him. Don't mess with the Dragons, and don't mess with the truth. So, there you have it. From the Dragons actually losing £230,000 to fraud, to Peter Matheson lying about his company owning an aircraft, these were the Dragon's Den pitches that were actually scams.